Hello everyone, we're going to be reading the last few chapters of Numbers now. 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, and 35, and 36. So, it's going to be the last 8 chapters of Numbers, and then we'll be moving on to Deuteronomy probably tomorrow. And we're going to also be reading Mark still as well. But, let's get right into it. On the first day of the 7th month, hold a sacred assembly and do no regular work. It is a day for you to sound the trumpets as an aroma pleasing to the Lord. Offer a burnt offering of 1 young bull, 1 ram, and 7 male lambs, a year old, all without defect. With the bull, offer a grain offering of 3/10 of an ephah of the finest flour mixed with olive oil. With the ram, 2/10, and with each of the 7 lambs, 1/10. Include 1 male goat as a sin offering to make atonement for you. These are in addition to the monthly and daily burnt offerings, with their grain offerings and drink offerings specified. They are food offerings presented to the Lord, a pleasing aroma. On the 10th day of the 7th month, hold a sacred assembly. You must deny yourselves and do no work. Present as an aroma pleasing to the Lord a burnt offering of 1 young bull, 1 ram, and 7 male lambs as a year old, all without defect. With the bull, offer a grain offering of 3/10 of an ephah of the finest flour mixed with oil. With the ram, 2/10, and with each of the 7 lambs, 1/10. Include 1 male goat as a sin offering, in addition to the sin offering for atonement and the regular burnt offering with its grain offering and their drink offerings. On the 15th day of the 7th month, hold a sacred assembly and do no regular work. Celebrate a festival to the Lord for 7 days. Present as an aroma pleasing to the Lord a food offering consisting of a burnt offering of 13 young bulls, 2 rams, and 14 male lambs, a year old, all without defect. With each of the 13 bulls, offer a grain offering of 3/10 of an ephah of the finest flour mixed with oil. With each of the 2 rams, 2/10, and with each of the 14 lambs, 1/10. Include 1 male goat as a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering with its grain offering and drink offering. On the 2nd day, offer 12 young bulls, 2 rams, and 14 male lambs, a year old, all without defect. With the bulls, rams, and lambs, offer their grain offerings and drink offerings according to the number specified. Include 1 male goat as a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering with its grain offering and drink their offerings. And their drink offerings. I didn't say drink their offerings. I'm just saying and their drink offerings. Oopsies. On the 3rd day, offer 11 bulls, 2 rams, and 14 male lambs, a year old, all without defect. With the bulls, rams, and lambs, offer them grain offerings and drink offerings according to the number specified. Include 1 male goat as a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering with its grain offering and drink offering. On the 4th day, offer 10 bulls, 2 rams, and 14 male lambs, a year old, all without defect. With the bulls, rams, and lambs, offer their grain offerings and drink offerings according to the number specified. Include 1 male goat as a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering with its grain offering and drink offering. On the 5th day, offer 9 bulls, 2 rams, and 14 male lambs, a year old, all without defect. With the bulls, rams, and lambs, offer their grain offerings and drink offerings according to the number specified. Include 1 male goat as a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering with its grain offering and drink offering. On the 6th day, offer 8 bulls, 2 rams, and 14 male lambs, a year old, all without defect. With the bulls, rams, and lambs, offer their grain offerings and drink offerings according to the number specified. Include 1 male goat as a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering with its grain offering and drink offering. On the 7th day, offer 7 bulls, 2 rams, and 14 male lambs, a year old, all without defect. With the bulls, rams, and lambs, offer their grain offerings and drink offerings according to the number specified. Include 1 male goat as a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering with its grain offering and drink offering. On the 8th day, hold a closing special assembly and do no regular work. Present as an aroma pleasing to the Lord a food offering consisting of a burnt offering of 1 bull, 1 ram, and 7 male lambs, a year old, all without defect. With the bull, the ram, and the lambs, offer their grain offerings and drink offerings according to the numbers specified. Include 1 male goat as a sin offering, in addition to the regular burnt offering with its grain offering and drink offering. In addition to what you vow in your freewill offerings, offer these to the Lord at your appointed festivals: your burnt offerings, grain offerings, drink offerings, and fellowship offerings. Moses told the Israelites all that the Lord had commanded him. Moses said to the heads of the tribes of Israel, "This is what the Lord commands. When a man makes a vow to the Lord or takes an oath to obligate himself by a pledge, he must not break his word, but must do everything he said. When a young woman still living in her father's household makes a vow to the Lord or obligates herself by a pledge, and her father hears about her vow or pledge but says nothing to her, then all her vows and every pledge by which she obligated herself will stand. But if a father forbids her, when he hears about it, none of the vows or the pledges by which she obligated herself would stand. The Lord will release her because her father has forbidden her. If she marries after she makes a vow, or after her lips utter a rash promise by which she obligates herself, and her husband hears about it, but says nothing to her, then her vows or the pledges by which she obligated herself will stand. But if her husband forbids her when he hears about it, he nullifies the vow that obligates her or the rash promise by which she obligates herself, and the Lord will release her. Any vow or obligation taken by a widow or divorced woman will be binding on her. If a woman living with her husband makes a vow or obligates herself by a pledge under oath, and her husband hears about it but says nothing to her and does not forbid her, then all her vows or the pledges by which she obligates herself will stand. But if her husband nullifies them when he hears about them, then none of the vows or pledges that came from her lips will stand. Her husband has nullified them, and the Lord will release her. Her husband may confirm or nullify any vow she makes or any sworn pledge to deny herself. But if her husband says nothing to her about it from day to day, then he confirms all her vows or the pledges binding on her. He confirms them by saying none to her when he hears about them. If, however, he nullifies them some time after he hears about them, then he must bear the consequences of her wrongdoing. These are the regulations the Lord gave Moses concerning relationships between a man and his wife, and between a father and his young daughter still living at home. The Lord said to Moses, "Take vengeance on the Midianites," that's what I named the video, "for the Israelites. After that, you will be gathered to your people." So Moses said to the people, "Arm some of your men to go to war against the Midianites, so that they may carry out the Lord's vengeance on them. Send into battle 1,000 men from each of the tribes of Israel." So 12,000 men armed for battle, 1,000 from each tribe, were supplied from the clans of Israel. Moses sent them into battle, 1,000 from each tribe, along with Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the priest, who took with him articles from the sanctuary and the trumpets for signaling. They fought against Midian as the Lord commanded Moses, and killed every man among their victims, were Evi, Rechem, Zerah, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. They also killed Balaam, son of Beer, with a sword. The Israelites captured the Midianite women and children, and took all the Midianite herds, flocks, and goods as plunder. They burned all the towns where the Midianites had settled, as well as all their camps. They took all the plunder and spoils, including the people and animals, and brought the captive spoils and plunder to Moses and Eleazar, the priest, and the Israelite assembly, at their camp on the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho. Moses, Eleazar, the priest, and all the leaders of the community went to meet them outside the camp. Moses was angry with the officers of the army, the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds who returned from the battle. "Have you allowed all the women to live?" he asked them. They were the ones who followed Balaam's advice and enticed the Israelites to be unfaithful to the Lord in the Peor incident, so that a plague struck the Lord's people. Now kill all the boys and kill every woman who has slept with a man, but save for yourselves every girl who has never slept with a man. Anyone who has killed someone or touched someone who has killed must stay outside the camp 7 days. On the 3rd and 7th days, you must purify yourselves and your captives. Purify every garment as well as everything made of leather, goat hair, or wood. Then Eleazar, the priest, said to the soldiers who had gone into battle, "This is what is required by the law that the Lord gave Moses. Gold, silver, bronze, iron, tin, lead, and anything else that can withstand fire must be put through the fire, and then it will be clean. But it must also be purified with the water of cleansing, and whatever cannot withstand fire must be put through that water. On the 7th day, wash your clothes, and you will be clean, and you may come into the camp." The Lord said to Moses, "You and Eleazar, the priest, and the family heads of the community are to count all the people and animals that were captured. Divide the spoils equally between the soldiers who took part in the battle and the rest of the community. From the soldiers who fought in the battle, set apart as tribute for the Lord, 1 out of every 500, whether people, cattle, donkeys, or sheep, take this tribute from their half share and give it to Eleazar the priest as the Lord's part. From the Israelites' half, select 1 out of every 50, whether people, cattle, donkeys, sheep, or other animals. Give them to the Levites, who are responsible for the care of the Lord's tabernacle." So Moses and Eleazar the priest did as the Lord commanded Moses. The plunder remaining from the spoils that the soldiers took was 675,000 sheep, 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, and 32,000 women who had never slept with a man. The half share of those who fought in the battle was 337,500 sheep, of which the tribute for the Lord was 675, 36,000 cattle, of which the tribute for the Lord was 72, 30,500 donkeys, of which the tribute for the Lord was 61, 16,000 people, of whom the tribute for the Lord was 32. Moses gave the tribute to Eleazar the priest as the Lord's part, as the Lord commanded Moses. The half beginning to the Israelites, which Moses set apart from that of the fighting men. The community's half was 337,500 sheep, 36,000 cattle, 30,500 donkeys, and 16,000 people. From the Israelites' half, Moses selected one out of every 50 people and animals as the Lord commanded him, and gave them to the Levites, who were responsible for the care of the Lord's tabernacle. Then the officers who were over the units of the army, the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds, went to Moses and said to him, Your servants have counted the soldiers under our command, and not one is missing. So we have brought as an offering to the Lord the gold articles each of us acquired, armlets, bracelets, signet rings, earrings, and necklaces, to make atonement for ourselves before the Lord. Moses and Eleazar the priest accepted from them the gold, all the crafted articles, all the gold from the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds, that Moses and Eleazar presented as a gift to the Lord, weighed 16,750 shekels. Each soldier had taken plunder for himself. Moses and Eleazar the priest accepted the gold from the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds, and brought it into the tent of meeting as a memorial for the Israelites before the Lord. The Reubenites and Gadites, who had a very large herds and flocks, saw that the lands of Jazer and Gilead were suitable for livestock. So they came to Moses and Eleazar the priest, and to the leader of the community, and said, Ataroth, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Heshbon, Eliah, Sebem, Nebo, and beyond, the land the Lord subdued before the people of Israel are suitable for livestock, and your servants have livestock. If we have found favor in your eyes, they said, let this land be given to your servants as our possession. Do not make us cross to Jordan. Moses said to the Gadites and Reubenites, should your fellow Israelites go to war while you sit here? Why do you discourage the Israelites from crossing over into the land the Lord has given them? This is what your fathers did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to look over the land. After they went up to the valley of Eshcol and viewed the land, they discouraged the Israelites from entering the land of the Lord had given them. The Lord's anger was aroused that day, and he swore this oath, because they have not followed me wholeheartedly. Not one of those who were 20 years old or more, when they come out of Egypt, will see the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Not one, except Caleb son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, and Joshua son of Nun, for they follow the Lord wholeheartedly. The Lord's anger burned against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years, until the whole generation of those who had done evil in his sight was gone. And here you are, a brood of sinners, standing in the place of your fathers and making the Lord even more angry with Israel. If you turn away from following him, he will again leave all the people in the wilderness, and you will be the cause of their destruction. Then they came up to him and said, we would like to build pens here for our livestock and cities for our women and children, but we will arm ourselves for battle and go ahead of the Israelites until we have brought them to their place. Meanwhile, our women and children will live in fortified cities for protection from the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until each of the Israelites have received their inheritance. We will not receive any inheritance with them on the other side of the Jordan, because our inheritance has come to us on the east side of the Jordan. Then Moses said to them, if you will do this, if you will arm yourselves before the Lord for battle, and if all of you who are armed cross over the Jordan before the Lord until he has driven his enemies out before him, then when the land is subdued before the Lord, you may return and be free from your obligation to the Lord and to Israel, and this land will be your possession before the Lord. But if you fail to do this, you will be sinning against the Lord, and you may be sure that your sin will be found out. Build cities for your women and children, and pens for your flocks, but do what you have promised. The Gadites and Reubenites said to Moses, we your servants will do as our Lord commands. Our children and wives, our flocks and herds will remain here in the cities of Gilead. But your servants, every man who is armed for battle, will cross over to fight before the Lord, just as our Lord says. Then Moses gave orders about them to Eleazar the priest and Joshua son of Nun, and to the family heads of the Israelite tribes. He said to them, if the Gadites and Reubenites, every man armed for battle, cross over the Jordan with you before the Lord, then when the land is subdued before you, you must give them the land of Gilead as their possession. But if they do not cross over with you armed, they must accept their possession with you in Canaan. The Gadites and Reubenites answered, your servants will do what the Lord has said. We will cross over before the Lord into Canaan, but the property we inherit will be on this side of the Jordan. Then Moses gave to the Gadites and Reubenites and the half-tribe of Manasseh, son of Joseph, the kingdom of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and the kingdom of Og, king of Bashan, the whole land with its cities and the territory around them. The Gadites built up Daban, Atra, Adre, Atroth, Shaphin, Jazer, Jogbeha, Beth Nimrah, and Beth Hadran as fortified cities, and built pens for their flocks. And the Reubenites rebuilt Heshbon, Eleale, and Kirithaim, as well as Nebo and Baal Meon. These names were changed in Sibmah. They gave names to the cities they rebuilt. The descendants of Machir, son of Manasseh, went to Galilee, captured it, and drove out the Amorites who were there. So Moses gave Galilee to the Machirites, the descendants of Manasseh, and they settled there. Jer, a descendant of Manasseh, captured the settlements and called them Havath Jer. And Nobah captured Kenath and its surrounding settlements and called it Nobah after himself. Here are the stages in the journey of the Israelites when they came out of Egypt by divisions under the leadership of Moses and Aaron. At the Lord's command, Moses recorded the stages in the journey. This is their journey by stages. The Israelites set out from Ramesses on the 15th day of the first month, the day after the Passover. They marched out defiantly in full view of all the Egyptians who were burying all their firstborn, whom the Lord had struck down among them, for the Lord had brought judgment on their gods. The Israelites left Ramesses and camped at Succoth. They left Succoth and camped at Etham on the edge of the desert. They left Etham, turned back to Pi-Hahiroth to the east of Baal-Zephon, and camped near Migdal. They left Pi-Hahiroth and passed through the sea into the desert, and when they had traveled for 3 days in the desert of Etham, they camped at Madrah. They left Madrah and went to Elam, where there were 12 springs and 70 palm trees, and they camped there. They left Elam and camped by the Red Sea. They left the Red Sea and camped in the desert of Sin. They left the desert of Sin and camped at Dophkah. They left at Dophkah and camped at Alush. They left Alush and camped at Rephidim, where there was no water for the people to drink. They left Rephidim and camped at the desert of Sinai. They left the desert of Sinai and camped at Kibroth Hattav. They left Kibroth Hattav and camped at Hazarath. They left Hazarath and camped at Rithmah. They left Rithmah and camped at Rimin Perez. They left Rimin Perez and camped at Libnah. They left Libnah and camped at Rissah. They left Rissah and camped at Kehelatha. They left Kehelatha and camped at Mount Shafir. They left Mount Shafir and camped at Hadbadah. They left Hadbadah and camped at Makilath. They left Makilath and camped at Tahath. They left Tahath and camped at Terah. They left Terah and camped at Mithkah. They left Mithkah and camped at Hashmonah. They left Hashmonah and camped at Mazrath. They left Mazrath and camped at Bein Jakin. They left Bein Jakin and camped at Hor Haggadah. They left Hor Haggadah and camped at Jot Bathah. They left Jot Bathah and camped at Avranah. They left Avranah and camped at Ezion Geber. They left Ezion Geber and camped at Kadesh in the desert of Zin. They left Kadesh and camped at Mount Hor on the border of Edom. At the Lord's command, Aaron the priest went up Mount Hor, where he died on the first day of the 5th month of the 40th year after the Israelites came out of Egypt. Aaron was 123 years old when he died on Mount Hor. The Canaanite king of Arad, who lived in the Negev of Canaan, heard that the Israelites were coming. They left Mount Hor and camped at Zalmunna. They left Zalmunna and camped at Punon. They left Punon and camped at Oboth. They left Oboth and camped at Abarim on the border of Moab. They left Abarim and camped at Dibon Gad. They left Dibon Gad and camped at Almon Diblathaim. They left Almon Diblathaim and camped in the mountains of Abarim near Nebo. They left the mountains of Abiram and camped on the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho. There on the plains of Moab, they camped along the Jordan from Beth Jeshimoth to Abel Shittim. On the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho, the Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you cross the Jordan to Canaan, drive out all the inhabitants of the land before you, destroy all the carved images and cast their out, and there cast idols and demolish all the high places. Take possession of the land and settle in it. For I have given you the land to possess. Distribute the land by lot according to your plans. To a larger group, give a larger inheritance, and to a smaller group, a smaller one. Whatever falls to them by lot will be theirs. Distribute it according to your ancestral tribes. But if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land, those you allow to remain will become barbs in your eyes and thorns in your sides. They will give you trouble in the land, and you will live. And then I will do to you what I plan to do to them." Reading those list of places sounded like I was just speaking gibberish, by the way. Anyway, chapter 34. The Lord said to Moses, Command the Israelites and say to them, When you enter Canaan, the land that will be allotted to you as inheritance is to have these boundaries. Your southern side will include some of the desert of Zin along the border of Edom. Your southern boundary will start in the east from the southern end of the Dead Sea, cross south of Scorpion Pass, continue on to Zin, and go south of Kadesh Barnea. Then it will go to Hazar Adar and over to Asmon, where it will join the Wadi of Egypt and in at the Mediterranean Sea. Your western boundary will be the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. This will be your boundary on the west. For your northern boundary, run a line from the Mediterranean Sea to Mount Hor, and from Mount Hor to Lebo Hamath. Then the boundary will go to Zadad, continue to Zephron, and end at Hazar Enan. This will be your boundary on the north. For your eastern boundary, run a line from Hazar Enan to Shephem. The boundary will go down from Shephem to Riblah on the east side of Ain, and continue along the slopes east of the Sea of Galilee. Then the boundary will go down along the Jordan and end at the Dead Sea. This will be your land with its boundaries on every side. Moses commanded the Israelites, Assign this land by lot as inheritance. The Lord has ordered that it be given to the 9.5 tribes, because families of the tribe of Reuben, the tribe of Gad, and the half tribe of Manasseh have received their inheritance. These 2.5 tribes have received their inheritance east of the Jordan, across from Jericho toward the sunrise. The Lord said to Moses, These are the names of the men who are to assign the land for you as inheritance. Eleazar the priest and Joshua son of Nun, and appoint one leader from each tribe to help assign the land. These are the names: Caleb son of Jephunneh from the tribe of Judah, Shemuel son of Ammihud from the tribe of Simeon, Eliadad son of Kislon from the tribe of Benjamin, Buki son of Jogli, the leader from the tribe of Dan, Heniel son of Ephod, the leader from the tribe of Manasseh son of Joseph, Kemuel son of Shiphthan, the leader from the tribe of Ephraim son of Joseph, Elizaphan son of Parnach, the leader from the tribe of Zebulon, Paltiel son of Azan, the leader from the tribe of Issachar, Ahihud son of Shalomi, the leader from the tribe of Asher, Pedahel son of Ammihud, the leader from the tribe of Naphtali. These are the men the Lord commanded to assign the inheritance to the Israelites in the land of Canaan. On the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho, the Lord said to Moses, Command the Israelites to give the Levites towns to live in. From the inheritance the Israelites will possess, and give them pasture lands around the towns. Then they will have towns to live in, and pasture lands for the cattle they own and all their other animals. The pasture lands around the towns that you give the Levites will extend 1,000 cubits from the town wall. Outside the town measure 2,000 cubits on the east side, 2,000 on the south side, 2,000 on the west, and 2,000 on the north, with the town in the center. They will have this area as a pasture land for the towns. 6 of the towns you give the Levites will be cities of refuge, to which a person who has killed someone may flee. In addition, give them 42 other towns, and all you must give the Levites 48 towns. Together with their pasture lands, the towns you give the Levites from the land the Israelites possess are to be given in proportion to the inheritance of each tribe. Take many towns from a tribe that has many, but few from one that has few. But the Lord said to Moses, Speak to the Israelites and say to them, When you cross the Jordan into Canaan, select some towns to be your cities of refuge, to which a person who has killed someone accidentally may flee. They will be places of refuge from the avenger, so that anyone accused of murder may not die before they stand trial before the assembly. These 6 towns you give will be your cities of refuge. Give 3 on this side of the Jordan, and 3 in Canaan as cities of refuge. These 6 towns will be a place of refuge for Israelites and for foreigners residing among them, so that anyone who has killed another accidentally can flee there. If anyone strikes someone a fatal blow with an iron object, that person is a murderer. The murderer is to be put to death. Or if anyone is holding a stone and strikes someone a fatal blow with it, that person is a murderer. The murderer is to be put to death. Or if anyone is holding a wooden object and strikes someone a fatal blow with it, that person is a murderer. The murderer is to be put to death. The avenger of blood shall put the murderer to death. When the avenger comes upon the murderer, the avenger shall put the murderer to death. If anyone with malice aforethought shoves another or throws something at them intentionally so that they die, or if out of enmity one person hits another with their fist so that the other dies, that person is to be put to death. That person is a murderer. The avenger of blood shall put the murderer to death when they meet. But if without enmity someone suddenly pushes another or throws something at them unintentionally or without seeing them, drops on them a stone heavy enough to kill them, and they die, they sense that other person was not an enemy and no harm was intended, the assembly must judge between the accused and the avenger of blood according to these regulations. The assembly must protect the one accused of murder from the avenger of blood, and send the accused back to the city of refuge to which they fled. The accused must stay there until the death of the high priest, who was anointed with the holy oil. But if the accused ever goes outside the limits of the city of refuge to which they fled, and the avenger of blood finds them outside the city, the avenger of blood may kill the accused without being guilty of murder. The accused must stay in the city of refuge until the death of the high priest. Only after the death of the high priest may they return to their own property. This is to have the force of law for you throughout the generations to come wherever you live. Anyone who kills a person is to be put to death as a murderer only on the testimony of witness, but no one is to be put to death on the testimony of only one witness. Do not accept a ransom for the life of a murderer who deserves to die. They are to be put to death. Do not accept a ransom for anyone who has fled to a city of refuge, and so allow them to go back and live on their own land before the death of the high priest. Do not pollute the land where you are. Bloodshed pollutes the land, and atonement cannot be made for the land on which blood has been shed, except by the blood of the one who shed it. Do not defile the land where you live and where I dwell, for I, the Lord, dwell among the Israelites. Chapter 36. The family heads of the clan of Galilee, son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, who were from the clans of the descendants of Joseph, came and spoke before Moses and the leaders, the heads of the Israelites' families. They said, when the Lord commanded my Lord to give the land as an inheritance to the Israelites by lot, he ordered you to give the inheritance of our brother Zelophehad to his daughters. Now suppose they marry men from other Israelite tribes. Then their inheritance will be taken from our ancestral inheritance and added to that of that tribe they marry into. And so part of the inheritance allotted to us will be taken away. When the year of Jubilee for the Israelites comes, the inheritance will be added to that of their tribe into which they marry, and their property will be taken from the tribal inheritance of our ancestors. Then at the Lord's command, Moses gave this order to the Israelites. What the tribe of the descendants of Joseph is saying is right. This is what the Lord commands for Zelophehad's daughters. They may marry anyone they please as long as they marry within their father's tribal clan. No inheritance in Israel is to pass from one tribe to another. For every Israelite shall keep the tribal inheritance of their ancestors. Every daughter who inherits land in any Israelite tribe must marry someone in her father's tribal clan, so that every Israelite will possess the inheritance of their ancestors. No inheritance may pass from one tribe to another, for each Israelite tribe is to keep the land it inherits. So Zelophehad's daughters did as the Lord commanded Moses. Zelophehad's daughters, Mahlah, Tizrah, Haglah, Milcah, and Noah, married their cousins on their father's side. They married within the clans of the descendants of Manasseh, son of Joseph, and their inheritance remained in their father's tribes and clan. These are the commands and regulations the Lord gave through Moses to the Israelites on the plains of Moab by the Jordan from across the Jericho. Okay, Numbers is done. We read 24 chapters of Numbers today. My goodness. It doesn't seem like that much, but it is. That's more than half of the book of Numbers, in fact. So, immediately, chapter 29. Let's talk about that. When I get there. So chapter 29. So God placed many days on Israel's calendar. The three great holidays celebrated in the 7th month were the festivals of trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and the Festival of Tabernacles. These holidays provided time to refresh the mind and body and to renew one's commitment to God. If you feel tired or far from God, try taking a spiritual holiday. Separate yourself from your daily routine and concentrate on renewing your commitment to God. The Festival of Trumpet demonstrated three important principles that we should follow in our worship today. The people gather together to celebrate and worship. This is an extra benefit to be gained from worshiping with other believers. The normal daily routine was suspended and no hard work was done. It takes time to worship, and setting aside this time allows us to address our attitudes before and reflect afterward. The people gave God something of value by sacrificing animals as burnt offerings to Him. We should show our commitment to God when we give Him things that are of value to us. God desires wholehearted worship. Our gift of money presented generously to God's work also demonstrates our thanks to Him, and the best gift, of course, is ourselves. The Day of Atonement was the most solemn day of the year and involved fasting, prayer, repentance, and a series of offerings to atone for the sins of the people. This was the one day each year that the high priest would enter the holiest part of the tabernacle and seek atonement for the sins of the people. The word atonement means the state of being at one with another. In other words, atonement is the process of making sinners who are separated from God at one with God again, restoring their relationship with Him. Forgiveness is the key to a restored relationship. The sacrifices themselves didn't actually earn God's forgiveness for the people's sin. The sacrifices were symbolic of the heartfelt desires of the people to be forgiven, to be at one with God again. Like all sacrifices we read about in the Old Testament, they pointed to the ultimate and final sacrifice of Jesus for the sins of all people, because of which we are forgiven and restored to a relationship with God once and for all. The Festival of Tabernacles was celebrated just after the Day of Atonement each year. This celebration lasted a few weeks and included sacrifices offered to the Lord each day. The people would build small shelters made of palm branches to remind them of the time before the Israelites have lived permanently in the Promised Land. It marked the end of harvest season and was a time to pray for rain, to bring new crops, and Jesus was at this festival when He promised living water to those who lived in Him, which we'll read in John whenever we get there. Verses 1 through 2 of chapter 30. Moses said to the heads of the tribes of Israel, "This is what the Lord commands. When a man makes a vow to the Lord or takes an oath to obligate himself by a pledge, he must not break his word, but must do everything he said." Moses reminded the people that their promises to God and others must be kept. In ancient times, people did not sign written contracts. A person's word was as binding as a signature. To make a vow even more binding, an offering was given along with it. No one was forced by law to make a vow, but once made, vows had to be fulfilled. Breaking a vow meant broken. I said breaking the law, that's why I got a little stumped there. Breaking a vow meant broken trust and a broken relationship. Trust is still the basis of our relationships with God and others, and the broken promise today is just as harmful as it was in Moses' day. Under Israelite law, parents could overrule their children's vows. We see this whenever it says, if a father hears his daughter's vow and forbids it, then the Lord releases her of it. But if he doesn't hear it, then she must keep those vows. So this helped young people avoid the consequences of making foolish promises or costly commitments. From this law comes an important principle for parents and children. The young people who still live at home should seek their parents' help when they make decisions. A parent's experience could save a child from a serious mistake, and parents, however, should exercise their authority with caution and grace. They should let children learn from their mistakes while protecting them from disaster. Overall, chapter 31. The Midianites were a nomadic people who descended from Abraham. This is where, and his second wife, Keturah. This chapter is where they take vengeance on the Midianites. So the land of Midian lay far to the south of Canaan, but large bands of Midianites roamed many miles from their homeland, searching for grazing areas for their flocks. Such a group was near the promised land when the Israelites arrived. When Moses fled from Egypt, he had taken refuge in the land of Midian. His wife and father-in-law were Midianites. Despite their alliance, the Israelites and Midianites became bitter enemies as Israel moved to settle in Canaan. 14 through 16, these verses in there, says, of chapter 31 says, Moses was angry with the officers of the army, the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds who returned from the battle. "Have you allowed all the women to live?" he asked them. They were the ones who followed Balaam's advice and enticed the Israelites to be faithful to the Lord in the Peor incident, so that a plague struck the Lord's people. Because the Midianites were responsible for enticing Israel into Baal worship, God commanded Israel to destroy them. When we discover sin in our lives, we must deal with it promptly, and completely, just as Moses did, by removing the influence of the Midianites when the Israelites later entered the Promised Land. It was their indifferent attitude towards sin that eventually ruined them. When God points out sin, act quickly to remove it from your life. Balaam's story, which was in Numbers 22 through 24, taken alone would lead us to believe that Balaam was actually an honest and God-fearing man. But here's the first of much biblical evidence that Balaam was not the good man he might have appeared to be. Verse 16. So God told Moses that the Israelites were to give a portion of the war spoils as an offering. Another portion was to go to the people who remained behind. Similarly, the money we earn is not ours alone. Everything we possess comes directly or indirectly from God and ultimately brings to Him. We should also return a portion to Him and also share a portion with those in need. So this is when it's calling God's calling them to divide the spoils among each other. And so, verses 48 through 50 says, then the officers who were over the units of the army, the commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds, went to Moses and said to him, your servant have counted the soldiers in our command, and not one is missing. So we have brought as an offering to the Lord the gold articles each of us acquired, armlets, bracelets, signet rings, earrings, and necklaces to make an atonement for ourselves before the Lord. After carefully accounting for all the men, the officers discovered that no one, not one soldier, had been lost in battle. At once they thanked God. After going through tough times, we should be quick to thank God for what was not lost as well as for what was gained. Chapter 32 is like the Transjordan tribes. 3 tribes, Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, wanted to live east of the Jordan River, sometimes referred to as the Transjordan area, on land they had already conquered. Moses immediately assumed they had selfish motives and were trying to avoid helping the other fights for the land across the river, but Moses jumped to the wrong conclusion. In dealing with people, we must find out all the facts before making up our minds. We shouldn't automatically assume that their motives are wrong, even if their plans sound suspicious. Verse 12 of 32 says, I can find it. Not one except Caleb son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite and Joshua son of Nun, for they followed the Lord wholeheartedly. Caleb and Joshua followed God wholeheartedly, and they were richly rewarded for it. If we follow God wholeheartedly, we will experience rewards here on earth and also in eternity. We will live more fulfilling and meaningful lives now and experience the ultimate blessing of eternal life forever. Following God half-heartedly not only gives us a less fulfilling experience on this earth, but also puts us in danger of falling away from God entirely, thus forfeiting our opportunity for eternal life with Him. The key to a fulfilling Christian life is trusting and following God with all your heart, not just half of it. Verse 16 through 19 says, then they came up to him and said, we would like to build pens here for our livestock and cities for our women and children. But we will arm ourselves for battle and go ahead of the Israelites until we have brought them to their place. Meanwhile, our women and children will live in fortified cities for protection from the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until each of the Israelites have received the inheritance. We will not receive any inheritance with them on the other side of the Jordan, because our inheritance has come to us on the east side of the Jordan. The land on the east side of the Jordan had been conquered. The hard work had been done by all the tribes together. But the tribes of Reuben and Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh did not stop after the land was cleared. They promised to keep working with the others until everyone's land was conquered. After others have helped you, do you make excuses to escape helping them? We need to finish the whole job, even those parts that may not benefit you directly. A simple pen for livestock had 4 roughly built stone walls high enough to keep wild animals out. Sometimes the tops of the walls were lined with thorns to further discourage predators and thieves. The pen's single entrance made it easier for a shepherd to guard his flock. Often several shepherds used a single pen and took turns guarding the entrance. Mingling the animals were no problem, since each flock responded readily to their own shepherd's voice. The 3 tribes who chose to remain east of the Jordan River wanted to build pens to protect the flocks of cities, to protect the families for the men who crossed the river, to help the rest of the tribes conquer the promised land. Chapter 33 overall is just travels of the Israelites. Verse 2 says, at the Lord's command, Moses recorded the stages in the journey. This is their journey by stages. Excuse me. Moses recorded the Israelites' journeys as God instructed him. This record of their geographic progress would remind them of their spiritual progress as well. So, have you made spiritual progress lately? So a good thing to do is to record your thoughts about God and lessons you have learned over a period of time. It can be valuable aid to spiritual growth, and a record of your spiritual pilgrimage will let you check up on your progress and avoid repeating past mistakes. Verse 4 says, who were bearing all their firstborn who the Lord had struck down among them, for the Lord had brought judgment on their gods. The Lord brought judgment on the gods of Egypt by sending the plagues. Last verses from 50 to verse 56 were says on the plains of Moab by the Jordan across from Jericho, the Lord said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you cross the Jordan to Canaan, drive out all the inhabitants of the land before you, destroy all the carved images and the cast idols, and demolish all the high places. Take possession of the land and settle in it, for I have given you the land to possess. Distribute the land by lot according to your clans. To a larger group give a larger inheritance, and to a smaller group a smaller one. Whatever falls to them by lot will be theirs. Distribute it among you to your ancestral tribes. But if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land, those you allow to remain will become barbs in your eyes and thorns in your sides. They will give you trouble in the land when you will live, and then I will do to you what I plan to do to them. Very menacing. But why were the Israelites told to destroy the people living in Canaan? And God had several compelling reasons for giving this command, though. God was stamping out the wickedness of an extremely sinful group of nations. The Canaanites brought on their own punishment. Idol worship expressed their deepest evil desires. It ultimately led to the worship of Satan and the total rejection of God. And God was using Moses and Israel to judge the people of Canaan for their sins in fulfillment of the prophecy in Genesis chapter 9, verse 25. God wanted to remove every trace of pagan belief and practice from the land. He did not want his people to mix with those who opposed him in any way, and knew that doing so would only lead to idolatry and compromise with his truth. The Israelites did not fully understand God's reasons, and they did not carry out his command. This eventually led him to compromise and corruption. It led them to corruption. In all areas of life, we should obey God's word without question, because we know he is just, even if we cannot fully understand his overall purposes. And God told Moses, before the Israelites settled in the promised land, they should drive out the wicked inhabitants and destroy the idols. We read Colossians not too long ago, and in chapter 3, Paul encourages us as Christians to live in the same manner, to throw away our old ways of living and move ahead in our new lives of obedience to God and faith in Jesus Christ. Like the Israelites moving into the promised land, we can destroy the wickedness in our lives or settle down and live with it, to move in and possess the new life. We must drive out the sinful thoughts and practices to make room for the new. And God never goes back on his word. And this is one warning the Israelites should not have taken lightly. God made it perfectly clear, if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land, I will do to you what I plan to do to them. Yet, for some reason, the people did not obey. The Israelites did not drive all the wicked nations out, and soon they began to assimilate their evil religious beliefs and practices. After a while, many Israelites didn't appear to be any different from the Canaanites. God fulfilled his warning in these verses during the period of the Judges, and in a fuller sense during the times of the kings, when he sent the Assyrians and the Babylonians to destroy Israel and carry the people away as captives. The Israelites learned that God's word should be taken very seriously. But if you don't do the job right the first time, it often becomes much more difficult to accomplish. God warned that if the Israelites did not drive the wicked inhabitants out of the promised land, later these people would become a source of a great trouble. And that is exactly what happened. Just as the Israelites were hesitant to clear out all the wicked people, we are sometimes hesitant to clear out all the sin in our life, either because we are afraid of it, as the Israelites fear the giants, or because it seems harmless and attractive, such as sexual sin. But Hebrews chapter 12 verse 1 tells us to throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. We all have idols. We don't want to let go of a bad habit, of unhealthy relationship, of certain life choices. And if we allow these idols to dominate us, they will cause serious problems later. Chapter 34 goes over the boundaries of Canaan. The division of the land was determined by sacred lot. No tribe was to claim its own land. Everything was an inheritance granted to them by God. The boundaries declared by God are larger than the area ever actually occupied by the Israelites. The boundaries correspond more to the land conquered by David and to the ideal territory portrayed by Ezekiel. The size of the land portrays God's generosity. He often gives us more than we could ask or think. And Dividing the land was an emotionally charged issue. Each person was wondering, will we live to the north, west, or south? The Lord laid out the plan and means for giving the land to the Israelites, and it was such that it forced them to be patient. They would not divide up the land before conquering it. Yeah, they prevented, I got confused real quick. Anyway, this prevented the temptation to only fight for one's own piece of property. Instead, the plan kept the Israelites all working together for mutual benefit. So when we lead new ventures, we should organize them so that everybody has an incentive to work for the good of the whole. In God's plan for settling the land, he determined what to do, communicated it clearly to Moses, and assigned specific people to oversee the appointment of the land. So no plan is complete until each job is assigned, and everyone understands their responsibilities when you have a job to do. Determine what must be done, and give clear instructions, and put people in charge of each part of it. 35, chapter 35, verse 2 and 3 now. Command the Israelites to give the Levites towns to live in from the inheritance the Israelites will possess, and give them pasture lands around the towns. Then they will have towns to live in and pasture lands for the cattle they own and all their other animals. The Levites were ministers. They were supported by the tithes of the people who gave them homes, livestock, and pasture lands. Likewise, we are responsible for providing for our ministers and missionaries so that we can be free to do their God-ordained work. Verse 6 says, 6 of the towns you give the Levites will be cities of refuge to which a person who has killed someone may flee. In addition, give them 42 other towns. Of the 48 cities given to the Levites, 6 were cities of refuge. These 6 cities were probably put under the supervision of the Levites because they would be the most impartial judges. Such cities were needed because the ancient customs of judges called for revenge in the event of the death of a relative or loved one. The Levites would hold a preliminary hearing outside the gates while the accused person was kept in the city until the time of the trial. If the killing was judged accidental, the person would stay in the city until the death of the high priest. At that time, he or she would be allowed to go free and could start a new life without worrying about avengers. If it was not accidental, the person would be delivered to the slain person's avengers, and this system of justice shows how God's law and his mercy go hand in hand. If anyone died because, to summarize like the last part of chapter 35, if anyone died because of violence, murder was assumed, but the murder suspect was not automatically assumed guilty. The cities of refuge assured that the cities of refuge assured the accused that justice would be served, but if that person left the city of refuge, then he or she would be assumed guilty and able to be killed by the avenging party. The people would be intolerant of the sin, yet impartial to the accused, so that he or she could have a fair trial. The cities of refuge represented God's concern for justice in a culture that did not always protect the innocent. It is unjust to overlook wrongdoing and to jump to conclusions about guilt. When someone is accused of wrongdoing, we need to stand up for justice, protect those not yet proven guilty, and listen carefully to all sides of the sword throughout. Finally, we see these guys, the family heads of the tribes of Gad, son of Machir, the son of Manse, who were from the tribes of descendants of Joseph, and spoke before Moses, the leaders and the heads of the Israelites. They talked about how Zelophehad's daughters got the inheritance, and if they married other tribes, those other tribes would get the inheritance. On Jubilees, that they will only get more of the inheritance. So Zelophehad had 5 daughters, but no other sons. After he died, his daughters were made an appeal to Moses because the inheritance normally passed only through the male line. The family property of Zelophehad would no longer have had official ownership, and his daughters would have been without property to support them. God told Moses that if a man died without sons, then the inheritance would go to his daughters, but the question of marriage arose. If the daughters were to marry outside the tribe, the land would belong to another tribe, and after the year of Jubilee. So Moses commanded that in such cases a woman should marry men in their own clan and tribe, so that each tribe would retain its original inheritance. Later, when the tribes received their land under Joshua, the daughters of Zelophehad received their inheritance as God had instructed. We don't have to look far to those who want to be considered special cases and exceptions to the rules. But wise leaders will sort out those who have legitimate concerns and make sure that justice is done. So the book of Numbers covers 39 years and closes with the Israelites poised near the banks of the Jordan River with the promised land in sight. The wanderings in the wilderness have come to an end, and the people are preparing for the next big move, the conquest of the land. The Apostle Paul says that the events described in Numbers are examples that warn us and help us avoid the Israelites' mistakes. From their experiences, we learn that unbelief is disastrous. We also learn not to long for the sinful pleasures of the past. We must not weaken our biblical beliefs by compromising them. We must not weaken our biblical beliefs by compromising them with our cultural values. If we choose to let God lead our lives, we should not ignore his message in the book of Numbers, even though it may be the most exhausting book to some people. I don't think it's that exhausting. I think it's really good, actually. So now we're done with the book of Numbers. Starting on the book of Deuteronomy tomorrow and finishing, and we're going to go through Mark as well. So yeah, that was a really good read. Just a second. Just set my bookmarks. Alright. Deuteronomy and Mark. We'll be doing those, and we won't be moving on to any other book until we get done with both of those. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Lord, thank you for today. I thank you for giving us wisdom and understanding, Lord. I ask that you continue to do that. I ask that if there's no one who has you, that they can find you, and if people already have you, I ask that they can continue to pursue, Lord. I ask that you give us a wonderful heart, a wonderful spirit, Lord, so that we can continue to lead our life with you. Give us kindness, peace, love, and joy, so that we can live in you, Lord. Lord, I ask that for in sorrows, that we can joyfully live out those sorrows, knowing that you will release us from those sorrows, Lord, as you've released us from our sinful debts, Lord. I thank you for all those things. I pray all these things, Lord, and in your name I pray. Amen. God bless. Good night. And love y'all.